Ah, the Wandering Mausoleums. Massive stone giants shuffling aimlessly around the lands between, carrying the headless remains of Marika's more disappointing offspring. Hello, fellow Tarnished. Today we're gonna talk about the Wandering Mausoleums, their guests, the unwanted demigods, and how they're all directly linked to Rykard and the Godskin Apostles. So, what's the story here? How do these oversized gravestones connect to Rykard, the god-devouring snake enthusiast, and the Godskin Apostles, who seem to have served the Gloam-Eyed Queen in their heyday? Let's start by analyzing the Wandering Mausoleums first. These incredible mobile shrines to failure, because nothing says you've let me down quite like decapitation and eternal display on a colossal walking tomb. And they're not just here for atmospheric build-up, no. These walking giants carry the bodies of Marika's unwanted children, the demigods who failed to live up to the Golden Order's expectations. And after disposing of them, instead of giving them a respectful burial, Marika decided to put them on display, headless, for all eternity. It's like a never-ending parade of divine disappointment, a reminder to everyone in the lands between of what happens when you don't meet your queen's standards. But who could have ever carried out the thankless job of dealing out this divine justice? Well, that's where Rykard comes in. Rykard, born to Renala and Radagon, was likely the eldest of his siblings, which naturally meant he got the best toys. And one of these toys was the beautiful Volcano Manor, a lovely fortress perched on top of a boiling hellscape surrounded by lava, where no sane person would ever want to visit. The perfect place to hide the Golden Order's dirty laundry, don't you think? And as Praetor, Rykard's job was far from glamorous. Sure, he got a cool title and an imposing lair, but his real task was fairly miserable. Rykard was tasked with managing the Golden Order's justice, basically. And let's be clear, the Golden Order wasn't just about giving friendly warnings or even the occasional slap on the wrist. No, they were into death, beheadings, banishments, and possibly eternal damnation. You know, the real ugly stuff, the kind of work that, understandably, was kept well away from the beautiful, pristine golden capital of Leyndell. So who better to take on the task than Rykard, the Golden Order's enforcer, tucked away on a remote volcano where no one could hear the screams? But it wasn't just about dealing with common criminals. No, Rykard's duties must have extended to those of divine lineage, and here is where it gets really dark, because in the modern day and age, regular dark is just not dark enough. Rykard's daily tasks were anything but ordinary. As Praetor of Volcano Manor, he was responsible for maintaining a sort of order in the lands between. This wasn't your average administrative role. Rykard was overseeing the gruesome work of his inquisitors, men like his old pal Inquisitor Giza, who was quite fond of his flesh-flaying will, and together they ensured that justice was served swiftly and brutally. But this wasn't a job for the faint of heart. Anyone working under Rykard had to have a strong stomach and a taste for the macabre, as they regularly dealt with the realm's riffraff and criminals in the most gruesome way possible. However, it wasn't just petty criminals that found themselves at the mercy of Rykard's brand of justice. No, every now and then a special guest must have popped up at Volcano Manor, and this guest was a demigod, one of Marika's own offspring, who had fallen out of favor. We do know from the story that some of Marika's children didn't quite measure up to their divine standards, and they ended up as the unfortunate residents of the Wandering Mausoleums. These colossal stone giants carry the remains of Marika's unwanted children. But what's particularly striking is that all these so-called unwanted children ended up dead, every single one of them, while their divine siblings, even Radagon's stepchildren, still roamed the lands between. Some were banished or went into hiding, but they lived. This raises the unsettling question, what could these unwanted children have done to deserve such a fate? And when exactly did these executions take place? Here's where things get complicated. We know that everything from before Marika's ascension and her creation of the Golden Order was sealed away in the Land of Shadow. So if these demigods are entombed in the lands between, it's because they came after she became a god, while she ruled the lands between. But here's the issue with that. After Marika's ascension, death itself was sealed away. So how exactly did these demigods ended up dead? And so now we need to bring the Godskin Apostles into the game, quite literally, those mysterious figures who were apparently once able to kill gods. But here's the real plot twist. You might be wondering, why the Godskin Apostles, right? They are clearly enemies of Queen Marika and followers of the Gloam-Eyed Queen, or at least that's what we've been led to believe. But what if Marika and the Gloam-Eyed Queen are actually the same person? Now, before you think I've lost the plot, hear me out. I've got a solid theory on this, but you'll have to wait for another video for the full breakdown because it's a tangled mess, but I think I finally managed to figure it out in a way that it makes sense. But that's not for today. For now, let's go with it and I'll explain it. Let's assume that they're the same person, as this theory will really help explain the next part of our story. The Godskin Apostles, as we know, were once the devout followers of the Gloam-Eyed Queen, a figure who, according to the lore, wielded the power of Destined Death, a force capable of ending even divine beings. However, one day, the Gloam-Eyed Queen was defeated by Malekith. And notice that I said defeated, not killed. The lore is very specific here. She was defeated, disappeared, and was never seen again. I'll explain more about this in a following video, like I said, but for now, let's stick to the facts. The Gloam-Eyed Queen was defeated, Destined Death was sealed away. And what about her followers, the Godskin Apostles? They weren't killed or dealt with by Marika in any way. They're still around, lurking on the fringes, sure, but they're very much present. And here's where it gets interesting for me. Given Marika's habit of hiding or outright eliminating anyone who was inconvenient to her, even her own children, why would she keep such dangerous beings around? Even if they were stripped of their power, they were still the loyal servants of a now defeated competitor. So why did Marika keep these potentially dangerous figures close? It doesn't seem to add up, right? Well, I think the reason is that they ended up serving Marika after the Gloam-Eyed Queen's defeat, because Marika was the Gloam-Eyed Queen, and so in theory they never stopped serving her. Here's how I see it. If my theory is correct, the Gloam-Eyed Queen was actually a part of Marika, linked to Destined Death, much like now Radagon is linked to the Golden Order. Once the Rune of Death was removed from the Elden Ring, which, if you think about it, the Elden Ring is a part of Marika, the Gloam-Eyed Queen metaphorically vanished as well. See her as the human form of the Rune of Death in the Elden Ring. If Marika removes the Rune of Death from her body, the Gloam-Eyed Queen is gone as well. And as I mentioned earlier, I'll dive deeper into these in another video. But now let's move on. With the Rune of Death sealed away, and given that the Godskin Apostles previously served the Gloam-Eyed Queen, it makes sense that Marika would keep those loyal servants around for herself. She could trust them to use Destined Death to carry out executions of gods and demigods whenever she needed. After all, the Rune of Death wasn't destroyed, it was sealed away, and as we now know, it was still very much accessible and usable. And this theory would also explain why there's a Godskin Apostle found in Volcano Manor. If Rykard was tasked with administering justice, and yes, killing demigods if he ever came to that, Marika wouldn't have handed him the Rune of Death directly. No, that would be too risky. But she might have trusted one of her loyal Godskin Apostles to handle the dirty work. And Rykard wasn't definitely doing the executions anyway. After all, who better to execute such divine tasks than those who were once god killers themselves? And once again, more on the original role in another video. So, back to Rykard, the Rykard who, even if indirectly, had some sort of access to Destined Death. And Destined Death was definitely used in the lands between, because even if you can disprove my previous theory, the demigods in the mausoleums are indeed dead, so something or someone with Marika approval must have killed them after she sealed away Destined Death. And also their heads are gone, and I believe the godskin are wearing their faces, but yeah, moving on. So what happened when Rykard, the man once tasked with upholding this divine justice, began to see the cracks in the system? What happened when he realized that his own head might be next on the chopping block? That's when things really started to get interesting. Rykard's disillusionment with the Golden Order likely began when he saw firsthand the fate of his kin, his brothers and sister, those other demigods who were supposed to be immortal, reduced to headless corpses paraded around in those wandering mausoleums. He must have realized at some point, either when Radagon left Renala and he became a stepchild of Marika, or maybe even figure out that Marika was Radagon, that no one, not even a child of Marika, him, was safe from her wrath. That surely must have pushed him over the edge, as he would for everyone. So, to recap, now we have Rykard not just killing gods, but realizing he's a demigod himself, and this may have changed the tune of his dream job a little. One thing is feeling powerful by killing gods or demigods, another one is when you realize you are immortal because your dad was actually a god, and immediately after you realize that you better keep in line or your stepmom, which is also your dad, will put an end to your immortal life. And so, with all these lovely thoughts fogging his brain, one day Rykard took one of his refreshing walks around the deepest depths of Volcano Manor, probably in the hope to clear up his lungs with some sulfur after a hard day at work, that he stumbles upon a rather large dilemma. Who was this uninvited guest in the bowel of his manor? How long has he been there for? Well, this is a story for another video, but in essence, while we know the serpent is an ancient divine entity, possibly tied to sacrificial rites and life consumption, its true origins and nature remains shrouded in mystery. But wherever he came from, or whatever reason he had to be there, this doesn't really affect our story at this point, so let's move on. Rykard one day met his new pet serpent. But what do we actually know about this meeting between Rykard and the snake? Well, here's what we can piece together. At some point, Rykard merged with the serpent, and by merged, we mean he let himself be eaten by it. Because, why not? Or perhaps that's just what he likes to tell people. In reality, maybe he just stepped on its tail and he ate him in return, and now is too ashamed to admit that if he just switched on the lights, he'd still be Praetor Rykard to this day. Who knows? But I digress. When Rykard merged with the serpent, he didn't just turn his back on the Golden Order, he became its greatest enemy. The man who had once enforced the Order's will now was leading a rebellion against it, and this rebellion, as we know, leads to the delightful mess we find when we finally step in and approach the manor ourselves much later on. Now, let's talk about why this serpent is such a threat to the Golden Order. It's not just because it's a giant god-eating snake, although that's certainly part of it. The serpent doesn't wield Destined Death, which sure is a plus for Marika, but it can indeed devour gods, effectively making all of Marika's effort to control life and death utterly pointless. If gods can be consumed and killed, then what's the point of sealing away Destined Death in the first place? The serpent represents a direct threat to the very foundation of the Golden Order's power. And don't forget, the serpent is a god itself, making it an enemy to Marika, who presides over a monotheistic religion with no room for competition. This serpent is not just any creature, it's an ancient forgotten god from a time before the Earth Tree, and its very existence challenges the order that Marika established. The serpent's ability to devour gods would undermine everything Marika has built, especially invalidating her control over the divine. It's also worth mentioning how suspicious it is that this serpent ended up in Volcano Manor at all. A creature of such power and ancient origins doesn't just wander into someone's basement. Its presence there suggests it was either deliberately placed, already existed, or was awakened by Rykard, perhaps as part of his growing disillusionment with the Golden Order. The fact that Rykard decides to merge with this serpent, whether out of desperation, ambition, or madness, signals his complete rejection of the Order and everything it stands for. And what about the Godskin Apostles? Well, these guys do have aspects of the snake, right? So if we go with the theory that Marika is the Gloam-Eyed Queen, and as we know from the story, The Gloam-Eyed Queen cared for the Godskin Apostles in their early life, whatever that means. Then Marika is connected to the serpent, like family directly connected to the serpent, in my opinion. And this opens up a whole new narrative that we're not going to explore right now, as it needs a lot more research to prove or disprove this theory, but it's a theory. And so, yes, the Godskin Apostles likely saw Rykard's transformation as an opportunity. After all, I don't believe they were ever truly loyal to the Order or Marika. They were merely biding their time, waiting for the right moment for their true leader to return after she was defeated. But they still had skills that could be used by Marika, although in a different kind of job. Seriously though, imagine if your job is to go out there and hunt and kill gods, and now you're stuck in a tiny office in Volcano Manor zapping demigods. They probably couldn't wait for the perfect opportunity to go on a strike. And so the Godskin Apostles, who were once carrying out Marika's deeds, now found themselves aligned with Rykard, the very man who had once worked to uphold the order they despised. It was a twisted alliance, born out of necessities and shared hatred, but that's how most alliances come to be anyway nowadays, so nothing new to see here. And so there you have it, Tarnished. This is the sad story of what's been going on inside Volcano Manor, in my opinion. As for the Wandering Mausoleums, they stand as a testament to the Golden Order's true brutality and potentially early failure even. They are the final resting place of Marika's unwanted children, the demigods who failed to meet her impossible standards for whatever reason that we still have to discover. And Rykard, he was both an enforcer and a victim of this system, ultimately destroyed by the very order he once upheld. And for now, the next time you see a Wandering Mausoleum, remember, it's not just a giant stone on 4 legs, it's a walking monument to the failure, betrayals, and bloody history of the Golden Order and the lands between. Thanks for watching.